My number one goal is to try and get this clip over 50,000 views. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but we shall try.
Just
Steve. So let's discuss carrier oils briefly. And by the way, Derek, the reason why I was going to ask Steve about skincare is because you have a propensity to lose hair, Derek, and expertise with the hair loss. So I often ask you because I don't lose hair easily, so I can't easily tell sometimes. Steve is prone to acne, and he's also done some specialty in like skincare and stuff like that also. So I want to ask you, Steve, two questions. Like in general, what are the outcomes of your research into carrier oils? Because that's something you introduced to me, and I think, to be honest, the public discourse on the subject of PEDs, that we never really were thinking so much about carrier oils.
no.
So what did you notice about carrier oils as well as solvents? And then there are issues with systemic inflammation as well as acne.
My number one goal is to try and get this clip over 50,000 views. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but we shall try.
Just put it in the title. This clip will get no views, and then reverse psychology, and then people will start watching it. So
I have done that before.
Carrier oils. It's often overlooked in the bodybuilding community, but it should definitely be in consideration when you make decisions where you purchase your products, because carrier oil can contribute to systemic inflammation. Now, way back when on the forum days, people would know that you could get some sort of improper response from ethyl oleate, right? And a lot of these underground labs, they use 10-15% of ethyl oleate with grapeseed oil, never mention it. And they would say, the carrier oil is grapeseed oil or cottonseed oil, right? Cottonseed oil is FDA approved, and grapeseed oil is tolerated in the compounding pharmacy scene. And even then, sometimes they use ethyl oleate, but they don't mention it. So you always have to keep that in mind. So there's a couple synthetic carrier oils that are actually industrial grade solvents that is very easy to suspend raw formulations in, whether that's testosterone enanthate, propionate, these pre-mixed cystinones, right? You buy that pre-mixed nowadays online, and you just throw it in there, throw it in a microwave, and it's ready. Now, the problem is with ethyl oleate, propylene guaiacol, one of Boston's favorites. I even send...
Boston likes propylene glycol?
No, the guaiacol, the injectable
Anadrol. The stuff in
and
Tren, isn't it? The stuff that smells very potent.
It smells terrible.
Yeah, that smell, you've got your like Trenace in you open up your little drawer thing and you have your Trenace and it just like permeates through the room.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's such a strong solvent that it literally dissolves you from the inside out. And that's why the systemic inflammation goes up. So I noticed this over the last 10 years that I've been requesting blood work. First, I understood that ethyl oleate people get an allergic response, but nobody ever explained how you could see that on the blood work, etc. And then I heard somewhere John Meadows talk about systemic inflammation and doing a high sensitivity C-reactive protein test. I think I heard about that 8 or 9 years ago from John Meadows. So,
really?
Okay, start doing some more research. Yeah. I mean, you have to get inspired somewhere, right? So
I didn't know anyone was talking about C-reactive protein.
Oh, John Meadows does.
Wow.
Yeah. But he does it on his private message website, right? So, and I believe he mentioned it somewhere where I read, maybe it was in a Geared Up podcast, also another radio show that got discontinued. Anyway, so started doing more research, started testing my blood work, and then I started to notice that on particular products, C-reactive protein would be severely elevated, and other products, pharmaceutical grade products, it would not be elevated. And then later I saw that on compounds in arachi's oil, mostly nandrolone or testosterone enanthate. Arachi's oil is refined peanut oil, that some people had systemic inflammation and other people did not. So there's an adverse reaction there as well. And the problem is with chronic systemic inflammation, elevated C-reactive protein levels, is that it damages the inside of your arteries. And you're always in this inflammatory state.
Well, everything damages everything, yeah.
Yeah, right. So over prolonged periods of time, considering that steroids also ruin your lipid levels and raise your LDL, which is more potential for foam cells, and change your acidity, changing your calcium levels in the blood, especially the ones that retain extra electrolytes. So now you have inflammation, high LDL and foam cell potential, and change calcium levels in your blood. That's a recipe for cardiovascular disease. And even the Arachis oil, which is FDA approved, whether that's a nandrolone, the cysteine, or the testosterone enanthate, even if you stay pharmaceutical grade, you can still create an increased potential for cardiovascular disease. And nobody does one cycle. We do cycles for decades, right? Even if it's hormone replacement. So on hormone replacement, let's say you do cysteine 250, 1 milliliter per week, right? Generous hormone replacement for bodybuilders, 250 milligrams per week, 1 milliliter of Arachis oil. C-reactive protein will be at the top of the reference range. But ideally, you want to keep your high sensitivity C-reactive protein test below 1 milligram per liter.
Below 0.3, really.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But, with the training and dietary practices and environmental pollutants, it's hard to, as a bodybuilder, it's hard to keep it below 1 milligram. Like when I stopped training, stopped eating, I was at 0.2 milligrams per deciliter, and the rest is just environmental whatever.
A lot seems genetic, though, I think, too, because it's like some guys who historically will have, shitty HDL no matter what they do. And then there's some guys whose C-reactive protein, like mine, is never above 0.3, even if I'm doing whatever, to be honest.
Even when you did the synthetic estrogens in ethyl oleate, did it go up?
No, because that's a measure of your host defense system's response activity. So it's a measure of two things. It's a measure of your actual damage in your body that your immune system is responding to, but it's also a measure of your immune system's response. So you simply may be someone who responds less, meaning that, for example, you may encounter
that could be bad then.
Yeah, that could be bad. Absolutely, absolutely. So you may have. We've never checked it out for you, Derek, but I already have I have a section for detoxification of the body from the genetic polymorphisms. We can look through them, and you could see your glutathione polymorphisms and stuff like that. I know you probably looked through some of them, but basically the point is that if you and there's other than that, there's your immune system, IL-6, for example, IL-6 polymorphisms are statistically significantly associated with longevity. So there's also polymorphisms in individual soldiers of the host defense system, of the immune system, that could affect how responsive they are and so on. So you just might be less responsive. But yeah, there's genetic polymorphism, just like with cardiovascular disease. But I wanted to add something, sorry to interrupt you, Steve, also. I want to add that, just to keep in mind for the audience listening, it's not just cardiovascular disease that's associated with steroid use combined with weightlifting, the weightlifting lifestyle. It's also autoimmune disease. Like you mentioned, John Meadows, who had colitis. I maybe had a genetic part, but I got Crohn's disease. Many people have their issues with their intestines. Many people have arthritis. Many people have psoriasis. Many people have anxiety. These are all autoimmune conditions. Also, it seems something about the weightlifting lifestyle, maybe it's all the inflammation over time or whatever, causes that too. So you don't want extra inflammation from your carrier oils or your solvents especially.
No, right. And so the problem is the selection of pharmaceuticals that you can actually use is very, very small. And that's why I always push pharmaceutical grade. I said, listen, get the best possible quality you can get besides whatever is in Arachis oil.
What is your favorite pharmaceutical testosterones? Which brand?
Bayer testosterone enanthate, or Rotex Medica testosterone enanthate. Then people start bitching about the castor oil being so difficult to inject, or the ricin that could potentially be contained. But listen, it's a pharmaceutical company. They're not going to produce products which have trace amounts of ricin inside, or ricin, or however you pronounce it.
Ricinoleic
acid, though, is that taken out of it? Because that would be what
that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I want. You mean the acid that helps with your hair, right?
Yeah.
So that's something. The castor oil is being used as a hair anti-hair loss method, and what I speculated.
I got you. Sorry, guys. I got you.
It's like I don't know if you know how it's used in prostaglandin E2 agonist or something like that, but it's actually used to induce labor in women alongside of pharmaceutical PGE2. So if you use I think the protocol is 60 milliliters of castor oil. If you slam it, you induce labor. Or if you want to shit yourself, you can also take a much lower dose, but it's still effective. And then at a lower dose than that, you can get some hair growth effects as well as beard growth, which is interesting.
I've seen the beard growth, but it's not as significant as alcohol. Yeah, I've seen it.
What I do notice, is just anecdotal evidence, and we talked about this maybe 2 years ago, right, Derek? When you mentioned that video about castor oil, and then I told you I've been injecting castor oil for 5 years, 6 years. That's my carrier oil of choice, and I have great hair. And all my clients that run castor oil have great hair also.
Huh. I don't think it would be enough. I don't think it'd be enough that you're ejecting,
No,
but it definitely is like
it's
it made me think
obviously.
it made me think at the time. I was like, shit, maybe I should get some of that.
Wait, while we're on this topic briefly, not to, we'll go back to this, but briefly, Derek, is there a new like a topical anti-androgen that's superior to RU or something like exciting other than RU? Sorry, I distracted you guys. So back to the solvent and carrier oil situation. So now you mentioned some of the carrier oils. The idea that I have is this, right? So solvents, and maybe we have to clip these and move them together. But the solvents, the idea of a solvent for the audience to think about, it's something that's supposed to make something soluble in a solution. It's supposed to digest it for you. So this thing digests things. If it still is able to, I don't know how chemistry works, but I'm imagining if it's still able to digest things after it's digested the whatever powders you have in the solution, which it must still be able to digest things, it's going to do it to some degree in your body. So my idea is this, and right now one of my tasks on my computer to do is to study solvents, because I want to do it for minoxidil, because I'm trying to figure out what solvents to use for my own minoxidil, because I realized like propylene glycol is causing a lot of inflammation. But then the issue becomes this, right? Is it about the power of the solvent? Like the more, like if I have a molecule, a certain kind of steroid, for example, that requires a very high solvent, like, or a high temperature, like trembolone, does that mean that therefore I'm always going to use a harsher solvent? So certain molecules of steroids, if you take them, there's always going to be a harsher solvent? Is that the way it is?
It wouldn't surprise me, because you saw that pharmaceutical trembolone was suspended in a Rutsch's oil with a decent concentration of benzyl benzoate. Now, I don't think that benzyl benzoate or benzyl alcohol is the issue, because that's been studied, and benzyl alcohol and benzyl benzoate actually acts as a prodrug. So when it's suspended in cottonseed, castor oil, or sesame oil, which are all FDA-approved carrier oils, the benzyl benzoate and the benzyl alcohol actually helps with absorption in the beginning, while the lipases work on the oil itself. Because as far as I know, lipases and esterases, they don't work on benzyl benzoate, benzyl alcohol, ethyl oleate, propylene glycol, and all these synthetic carrier oils. You have lipases that break down fat. They work on the carrier oils. And esterases, they work on the esters, cleave off the enanthate, the propionate, the acetate, right? One carbon atom at a time. That's why enanthate with way more carbon atoms takes a longer time, because they needs to be cleaved off one at a time. And then propionate has a couple carbon atoms, and three sessions of cleaving, and it's bioavailable, right? Now you have the active pharmaceutical ingredient being testosterone or whatever other compound. So the ideal of pharmaceuticals is this: you have a carrier oil that holds the majority of the pharmaceutical ingredient, not being active because it's testosterone enanthate, and the enanthate needs to be cleaved off by esterases. It's a depot. It's called an injection depot for a reason. You don't want MCT oil or propylene glycol to disperse, and now you have all this testosterone enanthate available being cleaved off by esterases, raising serum concentrations, getting tremendous amount of estrogen or dihydrotestosterone conversion for a short period of time, right? Because the oil disperses already. So now it's already being metabolized. So you want a carrier oil that sits in the depot for a couple of days. Castor oil stays in the depot for a couple of days. The half-life extends it to maybe 34 days even, depending on where the injection depot is. So you inject something, the lipases start to work on the carrier oil. If you don't have a carrier oil and it's all solvent, the lipases don't do anything. And in the meantime, these solvents start dissolving the tissue surrounding it, causing creatine phosphate kinase to increase, and the aminotransferases, which are also found in skeletal muscle. So when you see very high CPK and ALT and AST levels, and you're not on orals, you're not training that hard, that's this synthetic carrier oil dissolving your muscle.
So you just said something very controversial, which I've never heard before, which is this idea that I guess it's what's that word, like the viscosity of the oil. You're saying the more viscous oils will keep the depot better, and what I think Steve means by depot is literally the encapsulation of the oil, of the oil holding there instead of dispersing through the muscle, right? Is that what you're saying?
So exactly. So you have the injection depot, right? And then the carrier oil, the dynamic viscosity rating, because it's based on temperature. And of course, the dynamic viscosity rating goes down at a higher temperature if your body weight or body temperature is higher, but including the benzyl benzoate and the benzyl alcohol, also lowers this dynamic viscosity rating because it is a solvent. But it also disperses faster. That's why you see, regardless of the ester that you inject, within the first 24 hours, serum concentrations go up and then they taper off. It doesn't matter which ester. All these.
So that's
the benzoate and the benzoyl alcohol dispersing, acting as a prodrug, improving the delivery, and then whatever remained behind with testosterone annotate propionate or whatever ester, that is slowly being metabolized, maintaining serum concentrations. And the lipases work on that. But if you don't have an oil based as a carrier oil, there's nothing for the lipases to do. The propylene glycol just disperses.
Yeah, but there's still MCT oil is still a fatty acid. It will still be digested by lipases.
Right.
So, but the idea of what it disperses very fast. So that's a separate issue. So that one, I think, it totally makes sense, right? So if you inject in the fat, you have a more stable testosterone level than if you inject in the muscle, because the encapsulation, the depot is more secure and it's attacked slower. So it's totally
less blood flow and it stays in a circle, right? So there's less dispersal. So the volume where lipases and esterases can actively metabolize oil or esters away is less. And when it disperses more, the surface area gets bigger. So that's why MCT, it gets a very big surface area after the injection. So it disperses throughout all your muscles, and all these lipases and esterases can start working. And that's why with MCT oil, you need daily micro administrations. And with castor oil, you can do 1 injection a week, even though it takes forever to inject because it's so thick.
With that said, yeah, it's true. The MCT is convenient, and I agree with you. And I understand why people like it, mainly because of the convenience. But
injection convenience, and then you have to do daily micro injections because otherwise you don't have stable serum concentrations because it disperses so fast.
I mean, to some degree, I mean, with the enanthate, it's still going to be broken down slowly with the enanthate system. But I agree. I know what you're saying. For sure, there's going to be a spike. Yeah, this is completely.
Yeah, the spike is a lot different. You can check. You do 1 cc on testosterone, enanthate, and castor oil. You check your total testosterone the next day, and then do the same dose on MCT. It will be way higher, maybe 25% higher on your total testosterone.
So there's a couple of notes here. One is the danger of making depots. So the idea is that almost all infections that come from people that develop very actively and have to get surgically removed are those ones that are deep injections that are a pocket of oil, because it doesn't get dispersed. It's not able to be attacked by the immune system well, and bacteria forms.
Yeah, and then you get some sterile abscesses.
When you inject small injections and they're with lesser oils, they disperse easily. You can get infected. You'll see an inflammation will be hot, but it won't be localized. It won't be that kind of. So you might get a systemic one. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, as I was thinking, I wish there was a guy who would put cool fatty acids into the steroids. Like there are fatty acids that are actually performance enhancing, like stearic acid, which is a saturated fat, is a very healthy.
You'll see guys based on what they've researched on my YouTube channel about carrier oils. They start formulating their home brews differently.
Yeah, so what I would do if anyone's listening to this wants to try it, I would try stearic acid, and I would try decanoic acid. That's C10. Decanoic acid is a ligand of PPR gamma, like telmisartan. So you could be injecting yourself with a little ligand of PPR gamma, the natural ligands, which are actually short chain saturated fat.
And if it's an organic one that's not refined, like Migliol 840 and 815, that's refined MCT oil, and Arachis is refined peanut oil, and those still cause inflammation, while the MCT oil itself doesn't cause inflammation. So. So even if it's pharmaceutical grade, if it's an Arachis oil, then it's not good. And
you guys ever heard of sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It was just about oils, and you mentioned C10. I was thinking, have you guys ever heard of C60 before for anti-aging or
C60?
Yeah, it's like this stuff called fullerene, and it goes by it's like Buckminster. I don't fucking remember the name. Just type in C60 fullerene on Google, and it's an allotrope of carbon whose molecule consists of carbon atoms connected by single and double bonds so as to form a closely or partially closed mesh. Anyways, it's supposed to be, it's super hyped up in the biohacking community about like managing a bunch of different diseases of aging, essentially.
But it's a lipophilic compound that allows you to dissolve pharmaceuticals.
No, I don't know. I was just wondering in general if you guys have heard of it.
It's a very long chain fatty acid, so it's a 60 saturated fat.
Oh, 60 carbons, right?
Oh no, you said it's a polyunsaturated fat, huh?
I was just reading the Wikipedia
interesting. We'll check it out later. So anyway, so the other thing I want to ask you, Steve, is with the acne, with the solvents and the carrier oils, do you notice it's basically about the inflammation level, where when people have high inflammation, that's when they get the acne from the...
They get worse acne. I mean, they still predisposition to acne. So even if you change to pharmaceutical grade compounds that don't cause any systemic inflammation, and you keep your C-reactive protein as low as you can, you'll still get acne. It's just acne is so cumbersome. Acne, hair loss, libido, those three are the most complicated side effects that men using performance enhancing drugs can experience. Hair loss.
No, anxiety also.
Anxiety also, yeah. Okay, I have
very hard to do.
And you have to tackle that from so many different aspects. And you can, you have, let's say you have 10 potential causes, and then you have to slowly start ticking them off. So and everybody has to tack off different boxes. So let's say you're using this propylene glycol formulation for injection convenience, and you switch to compounding pharmacy using grapeseed oil and no MCT, just benzoyl benzoate and benzoyl alcohol for sterility and solvency. And then maybe your acne is 10% better. Okay, then you have to look at your dairy intake, and then maybe your hygiene, or maybe you have a little bit of topical bacteria that you need to take care of with doxycycline. There's many avenues to explore.
Just for the audience to put in perspective, like when you go online and you look for unique minoxidil formulations, one of the things you'll find from the MDs that are hair loss guys is that they'll say no propylene glycol. Like that's a selling statement for the minoxidil because it's so inflammatory even topically. So who knows what's going on when you're injecting this stuff?
Guess what, one interjection. Guess what? Sorry, Derek. Guess what? All the oral dropper SARMs are made with propylene glycol.
Oh, really?
That's why they taste goddamn 400 and shit like that.
Yeah. All these, you think SARMs are safe, and I don't have to inject. You still get systemic inflammation from the 2 or 3 milliliters of oral SARMs that you take, because again, it's such a high solvent, and you'll taste it. It tastes like,
you could taste that Cialis, the dropper Cialis that used to come from Enhanced Athlete. That used to taste like poison. Like you felt like your tongue was ripping up. You're like, this is not worth it. I don't need to have sex. This is not.
And what is this? How many sources I talked to said, stop doing this because you're killing your customers. You're literally killing your customers over time with the solvency bullshit.
Yeah.
It's but half of them don't want to listen, so I put it online. So listen, at least I can educate some people.
I have some MK677 right now that I swear I could probably remove the paint from my walls with. I received this one that I took a little bit, and I got a headache an hour later. I was like, this is inflammation. God damn, what is this thing? It tasted,
So it's a little trick that I used to apply. It's not 100% foolproof, but it does work for most of the oil. So you take a little bit of the oil, you put it on your finger, and you start rubbing the ink off your syringe. Everybody has syringes. Now, it's 90% it works because MCT does the same thing. It also wipes the ink off a syringe, but it doesn't cause any inflammation. And Arachi's oil doesn't wipe anything off, but it can cause inflammation. So it's not 100% foolproof method, but it's way cheaper than doing a blood test. And if it does wipe off, contact the source and say, hey, is this, what carrier oil is this? Oh yeah, well, quantity sufficient. You just throw it away. If they don't want to say MCT, just throw it.
The one thing I wanted to mention is about skin stuff. The reason I wanted to mention is that I got a steamer recently. Have you guys ever tried this before?